Here comes the gavel.
I call to order the February 24th, 2020 regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very much. I'll just note that tonight we are visited by the Webelow Scouts of Pac 55 with Bridget Uzer here as the den leader. Yes. Coming in here to on the theme of building a better world and looking to get some information about how town government works, and sitting in on our meeting now to see a little bit about how the Selectmen's meeting is conducted. So welcome all of you. Thank you very much for being here, and we appreciate your interest. Hope we are entertaining.
Thank you very much for having us.
Great, thank you. It's, can we go on to approval of minutes of February 10, 2020 regular meeting?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes of the February 10th, 2020 regular meeting as submitted.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? And I will abstain. I was absent from the meeting. It's now past the hour of 7 o'clock. We have Sarah Jane Balinskis doing business Beyond Nutrition to consider an application for a common victualler license as submitted by Sarah Jane Balinskis. Doing business is Beyond Nutrition, LLC, for premises located at 269 West Main Street, Unit 2A. Welcome. And we have your application. Could you just kind of take us through what you'd like to do here?
Yeah, we want to open a nutritional shop. We'll be serving healthy shakes and teas. So it's just a shop that we call Beyond Nutrition. So like I said, it's all serving healthy shakes and teas, dealing with powders, water, and ice. Nothing more than that, no food services, just the shakes and teas.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions by the board? Leslie?
Yeah, I'm just curious about the layout of the space that you're going to be using and how you'll be using it.
I don't know if you want to pass that along, but I have it right there.
Yep, you should have a interior layout in your packet.
So we will be building a bar, obviously not for alcohol purposes, just to be serving shakes and teas. We will have patrons coming in to sit at the bar until they're served the shakes and teas to enjoy it there. And then they can also have the option to have the takeout as well.
Okay.
That sounds good. Nice.
Any other questions? Julianne?
So in your application, you refer to it as a nutrition club.
Correct.
Is it somewhat educational? Is it nutrition education kind of?
So not necessarily, I mean, we're helping others to perform and create a healthy lifestyle. When they come in, we're going to be telling them how to create a healthy lifestyle. You can come in, like you can do the shakes 3 times a day, 2 times a day, 1 time a day with the meal replacement. So when people come in and ask about that, we will be telling them about the nutritional value of the shakes and of the teas. So that's why we call it Beyond Nutrition, because it's more than just giving them the nutritional factors. We're giving them something to create that within not having to eat bad food, fast food. So it's something healthy that you can have as a meal replacement.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just real quickly.
Leslie?
Yeah. So you said people can just take out as well?
Yep.
But are you actually selling anything that's pre-made in packets that they can just walk in and buy? Or is it just it's mixed up there and they can walk out with
It's
it?
mixed up there and they
Okay.
can walk out.
Okay.
So basically what it is, it's a base of Herbalife. I don't know if any of you have heard of Herbalife supplements. So that is what the base of the shake is, all Herbalife products. So that's why we call ourselves a nutritional club, because they say it should be a private club. So people can sign up to become distributors, but we're not going to be pushing that on anyone, because we want our patrons to come in, and we want them to come in and out. We don't want them to just come in one time, but we want to make it as like a family type of oriented environment, so they come in and out on a daily basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No more questions? Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to grant a common victualler license to Sarah Jane Balinskis of Beyond Nutrition, LLC, for premises located at 269 West Main Street, Unit 2A, with the condition that the licensee receive satisfactory inspections by the Building, Fire, and Health Departments.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Very good. Thank you very much.
So much. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. First time I had to speak in front of a board like this, so as you
did
can
very
tell, I
well.
was a little nervous,
You look
but
very comfortable.
thank you guys, appreciate it. Thank you, thank you. You have to come in for some shakes. Thank you.
And on to reports. Julianne?
So, welcome to the Scouts. It's a little bit coincidental because the first thing I wanted to report on tonight was a thank you to the fifth grade classes and the teachers at Peasley School who sent us a Valentine's Day card. I don't know if any of you will go to Peasley, but it was great to hear from the students and what they're learning about. They're learning about compassion and civics and even nutrition, it seems. They asked us about healthy meals. The students had some great questions and suggestions for us, so I would encourage them to, and all of you, to keep corresponding with us. My second thing is I attended a cultural council meeting and would like to remind people of the grant reception this Thursday, February 27th at the library. This group has been working very hard, and if you'd like to attend, it will be a lovely evening, I'm sure. I also attended the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Listening Session on February 19th. This was a presentation about how climate can affect a town. So that was, the whole report is available online, but just so you know what that was about. And the other thing I want to report about is the Northborough Historical Society is starting its fundraiser next month. They do a calendar raffle for the month of March, and this is what it looks like. For $10, you have a chance of winning a whole bunch of prizes. There's $2,000 worth of prizes on the calendar. So please, if you would like to support the Northborough Historical Society, they do great things. They take care of all of our history, all of our papers, and they do some great programming. And the last thing I wanted to mention is in Chief Liver's last report, he talked about the Civilian Police Academy, which is coming up again. And Lieutenant Galvin, would you give us some details on that?
So the Civilian Academy that we're involved with, it's new in that we're partnering with the Westboro Police Department and Southboro Police Department partner. It's piggybacking on our Youth Academy. We did it the same way. We're excited because the Civilian Academy is something that we did in the 80s and early 90s, and at the time it kind of ran its course, so it's nice to bring it back. This academy, it starts April 1st and runs for 8 weeks. It'll end May 20th. It's every Wednesday from 6 to 9 is the schedule they have. It'll rotate through the 3 different departments, so everyone will get to see each department, their facility, their equipment, their cruisers. And each night there'll be a classroom portion such as traffic investigation, patrol procedures, how to book someone, how to conduct motor vehicle stops, criminal investigations. So in addition to the classroom portion, there'll be a practical portion as well where we'll have role players so you can see what it's like to stop a car, different type of situations that we come across. You can go and deal with the role players, see how you would deal with it. Part of it is courtroom testimony. There'll be someone from the Worcester County District Attorney's Office in there to talk about that. And then one of the weeks, there'll be a tour of the Worcester County House of Correction. So if anybody is interested, we do have applications. They're at the police department. You can just walk right in the lobby and get one. And if anyone has any specific questions, Sergeant Jim Cesney is the individual, the officer at the department that's handling all of that. So we're just very excited to partner with the other communities and give this a go because the Youth Academy was so successful, and we think this will be as well.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. That's it for me.
Thank you, Julianne. Leslie?
Okay, I just want to mention again the work that's going on the facade of the town hall. I don't know if you all have noticed that, and there's a lot of platform and scaffolding and stairways set up in the front of the building to repair the facade or the front of the town hall building. John, did you say last time how long that was going to take?
It'll be a couple more weeks. We had to
Okay.
order new letters, so.
Oh, right,
Say
right.
town hall, so those have a little bit of delivery time, but probably a neighborhood of about 3 weeks.
Okay, it's quite an elaborate scaffolding they set up. It looks safe.
Well, in order to replace the
Good.
blocks up there, they
Yeah.
need to have a steady platform to
Yeah.
do that, so.
Awesome.
But it's going very well. We're anticipating it's going to wrap up shortly, and it should look good.
Glad to see that. So take a look at that when you go by. Also, the early voting started today and goes through the 28th. And again, John, I didn't know if you, sorry to put you on the spot, but did everything go well today
Yes.
with all that?
Yep.
Okay.
We had very good turnout. We anticipate we're going to continue to have a good, steady flow of folks coming in. It seems like the more time you have for early voting, you take the same number of people, but as much time as you had, they sort of spread out
Spread
over
it
that time. But the good news is it's convenient. If you want to vote, there's really no reason not to be able to vote. So.
That's great. Excellent. And as of yesterday, the hands-free driving law went into effect, which I'm personally very excited about. It's actually a little bit more difficult, because your phone is further away from you in the car. However, I am hoping it cuts down on texting, and I'm sure the police department is going to be hopefully really watching out for this, because I can't tell you how many people I pull up to at a stop sign or actually while driving. I'm seeing people texting while driving and looking over to the side and typing on their phone. So all that takes is 1 second, and they could kill somebody. So it's a really, really scary, scary thing. So I think it's exciting that Massachusetts has finally gotten their act together and has this legislation out, effective as of yesterday. And I hope that everybody takes it very seriously, because lives are at stake with this. And I attended the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Listening Session at the library, and I found it very, very interesting. The woman who presented did an excellent job, I thought, and it's Weston and Sampson,
Correct. Yep.
right? Yes. She did a very nice job summarizing all that, I thought, and getting input from the people who were in attendance. And it's, it's part of the process. There've been other things that have happened before that evening, but I thought that was interesting. And I did want to thank the core team members, Scott Charpentier, Kathy Jubert, Mia McDonald, John Coder, David Parenti, Chief, Jason Little, June David Forrest, Casey Mellon, Nancy Dragon, and Fred Litchfield. Is that the complete list, I think? So I know it's a lot of work, all these things, but hopefully we'll have some good solutions as far as how Northborough views this and what our highest priority issues are, really, and how we can address them the best way. So I thought that was great. So that is my report.
Thank you, Leslie. Tim?
Thank you. Just noticed as I was leaving this morning, I've got 2 kids, 4 and 7, that school vacation's over, and I'd like to remind people every once in a while how important it is when you're driving around town to pay attention to the school buses. And when the stop signs goes up, that you are to stop for the school bus for kids crossing the street. We live on a busy street. We have an issue with that all the time, and I know other people around town have that same issue. So now that the kids are back in school, you had a week off, now they're back, so please, please, please pay attention to the school buses when those flashing lights goes on. They go on for a reason, so please slow down and stop for the stop signs. And I attended the Council on Aging meeting last week on the 11th, had a chance to meet the new interim director up at the senior center. Very, very nice, very qualified, and very interim. So I know that we have been aggressively looking for somebody up there to be the new director at the senior center. One question that I did get asked at that meeting from the council was how the town is progressing with finding a facilities manager. And their concern is that a lot of the facilities management is under the responsibility of the director, and how that's going to look going forward. So, John, if you just have a
Yeah,
quick
sure.
update on that.
Briefly, as you all know, we budgeted in the fiscal '20 budget at the 6-month mark, a facilities manager, a position I'm very passionate about, including in the budget, because we have a very significant facilities need, and we don't have a single person that addresses that. So that budget was effective January of this year. We're not expecting to get into a recruitment for a new senior center director, so that sort of hopped the line, and we weren't expected to be looking for an assistant town administrator either. So those two positions are queued up ahead, and we're just wrapping up the senior center, and hopefully we'll be with the assistant shortly behind that. The other issue is that, as I said, it was very difficult to fit that position. I know people look at the size of the budget, but things are actually very tight, and we couldn't fit it in for the entire year. And one of the things I wanted to make sure of is getting through, far enough into the budget process for fiscal '21, that I feel comfortable that we are going to be able to fund the position for the whole year next year, but also have a reasonable expectation that we're going to be able to fund it going forward. Obviously, we don't want to hire somebody and have any instability there. So I think we're getting close to that, and as I said, senior center director's wrapping up, assistant town administrator, and then this position will be right on the heels.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
That ends my report, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Leslie? you have
I'm
a
so
question?
sorry, there's another item I wanted to mention, I apologize.
Sure.
I forgot something. I just want to congratulate the Algonquin girls gymnastics team. They won their South Sectional this weekend. My daughter was a member of that team when she was at Algonquin, and it's a very, very exciting team, a lot of hard work, but these girls are phenomenal, and they are going on to states. I forget exactly when it is. Jason, you had mentioned
I'm not sure. It might be coming up this weekend.
probably this weekend or in a couple weeks max.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So those are fun meets to watch. If you ever have the opportunity to see a gymnastics meet, pretty cool. So anyway, congrats to them. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Leslie. Don? Oh, brings it to me. I'll have to get to my notes now. Okay. First of all, I was absent the last meeting. Vice Chair Don Rand conducted the meeting in my absence. I must say it was a very quick and efficient meeting. I still have a lot to learn, so thank you, Don. Appreciate you doing that. As Julian mentioned, we had received the Valentine's Day card from the Peasley fifth graders. Very unexpected but pleasant surprise. Just a very fun thing. They had some very interesting comments about their perception of who we are and their perception of what should be going on in the school system. So we invite that input, and we look forward to continuing, as Julian said, continuing the dialogue. On Tuesday, February 18th, the planning board met to, in part, review some of the input from the Master Plan Steering Committee and evaluate any further changes to be made to the master plan. So that process is ongoing, and we will continue to keep you updated. On Saturday, February 15th, I was fortunate enough to attend the Memorial Hockey game played at North Star Arena in honor of Brian Arsenal. This was actually on Brian's, what would have been his 34th birthday on February 15th. Algonquin played the West Springfield Terriers. It was a nice pregame ceremony with American Legion Post 234 Honor Guard on hand. We had a trio of trumpets to play the Star-Spangled Banner, and a ceremonial puck drop that featured Brian's longtime friend Sean Durkin doing the face-off duties. So we were very appreciative of that. Also appreciative of the West Springfield team, mindful of the occasion. The team captain skated over and presented Mrs. Arsenal with a donation to the event. So that was very nice. The Algonquin team took care of business at that point, posting a convincing 8-1 victory, and the proceeds of the event go to the Brian Arsenal Memorial Scholarship Fund. So all around a very nice event and very successful. And then just to echo Leslie's comment about early voting, Town Clerk Andy Dowd asked me to mention specifically early voting is open this week, Monday, Wednesday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., Tuesday, Thursday from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., and on Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. The primary election day is next week, Tuesday, March 3rd. That will be at Melican Middle School for all precincts from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And that concludes my report. John, anything to add?
Just one comment, just to let folks know that we did invite our legislative delegation in. They'll be at your next meeting, and I believe everybody is confirmed, so they will all be here.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Brings us to public comment. Anyone care to offer some public comment? Yes? Oh, I see. Okay. Thank you all very much for attending tonight, and we look forward to seeing you more in the future, so. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, come
Bye.
again.
See ya.
You have, excuse me, you have one copy under the seat here, I think, yeah. I'm not sure whose that is. So, yeah,
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. It's a great group. Okay, public comment. Ms. Maselli,
Hi, how are you today?
Hey.
Glad you're back.
thank you very much. Would you care to step up? The microphones are probably a little bit better. Yeah.
I'm just following up on my last request 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I had written a letter to copy it, asking about the process to go through getting the different signage and stuff on the streets like we have on Davis. And I didn't get any response, so I'd like to be able to do it the right way and start, how's the process go? Who do you go to first? What do you need? I think you saw this already, so I'm not
Yeah.
gonna go through the whole thing. But
Okay.
I'm just following up on that.
John? Yeah.
If I may, Scott Charmentier, DPW Director, if you want to just speak to this, Scott, on the signage?
So, we had a number of crash incidents over a series of years on the short section of Davis Street between West Main and Southwest Cutoff. It's been a traffic enforcement challenge as well with speeding, and there's been some documented school bus interactions that have not gone well in addition to that. So we pursued a truck exclusion on that route. We did traffic counts. The traffic counts did bear the adequate percentages to request a truck exclusion from that section of road. Mass DOT approved that. That truck exclusion was implemented. In addition to that, some new signage was installed. Curve ahead signs, you see the squiggly line curve ahead signs, we added a couple of those. And then we did something new to the town of Northborough. We added LED speed limit signs at each portal to the roadway. Now, those LED speed limit signs are motion activated by oncoming vehicles. It's a beta test, you know, where we want to see how it works, see if it has any reductions in crashes, you know, if the additional signage and the lit signs reduce the number of crashes, reduce the amount of enforcement needed, reduce the amount of enforcement requests. They've only been up for, I don't know, maybe a month and a half. So they're still fresh. I'm sure people are noticing them now. What I want to see is, in the long term, does it become just part of sign clutter, and people just don't see it when they drive by? They're very expensive. It's over $5,000 just for that installation. So it's a costly endeavor, not something that Public Works is against, in the right applications in the right locations. So that's our status. That's how they got there. I'm working with Chief Liver and evaluating crashes and enforcement issues, but not yet. It's only been a month and a half.
Okay. Do you see a time frame where you will have compiled enough data to make an assessment about how effective it is?
I would say likely a year.
Okay,
Go through 1 year cycle, you know, capture all the different weather events, the different circumstances, school in, school out, you know, sun glare during different seasons, and see if we see a noticeable difference. You know, I'll have to talk to Chief Liver. Usually when you do a crash report, you do it over a 3-year period, not a single year, but if 1 year is not conclusive, then 3 years may be more appropriate.
okay. Thank you.
So again, I didn't understand though how to start the process. I understand what you've done.
Well, my understanding from these comments is that essentially this particular installation is a pilot program, and until we have the information back about how effective it is, we would not be entertaining further installations immediately.
All right, so that would mean that you'd have to wait another year if there are other people, like on Northgate and such, that have been asking for things like that. You'd have to wait another year for this pilot program to actually be completed before they could make those kind of requests.
The,
And if
the
they
the issue here is that it's unclear how effective this is actually going to be to mitigate the problem that's been reported. Until that's well enough understood to determine that it is effective and it is worthwhile to put other installations out, then that's when we would undertake to do that.
So pretty much you're saying a year then, if he's saying that it's a year.
I would anticipate it will take a year of data collection to understand if this is actually effective. Yes.
And then for further things, like we have on Maple Street, we do have a truck restriction we had years ago, but we don't have the correct signage, and it doesn't really get a lot of viewing by the trucks that keep flying by. How do I get that more enforced and get some more attention for that?
If I can make a suggestion,
Yes,
Mr. Chair, why don't you speak with Scott Charpentier offline, and he can answer your questions regarding sign enforcement? He can answer those for you.
All right, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you for your comments. New business, update on preliminary FY 2021 budget.
All right, so in your packet, you have a memo from me giving you a little bit of an update on where we are on our fiscal '21 budget. Just by, again, I'm not going to read it, but just by way of background, I'll take you back to the first real key point in our budget process, which is back in December, where we do a financial trend monitoring and our 5-year projections. As part of that process, we have some standard goals. I'm not going to get into all of them, but essentially, the point of the overall point of the budget is to protect and improve the town's overall financial condition, to develop a budget that's in conformance with our comprehensive financial policies, to maintain Northborough as an affordable place to live and operate a business, and last but not least, to protect our long-run financial solvency. So again, we're trying to hit all the different aspects of what would contribute to the town's positive financial condition, and we've got multiple indicators that we spend a lot of time going through back in December. So in terms of where we are today, I want to hit on a couple of big pieces of the budget that have either fallen into place or close to falling in. The first is state aid. So you know the governor came out with his House 2 budget in January 22nd, and essentially, when you first look at it, it looks like we've got a 1.5% increase in state aid, but when you look at the assessments, because state aid comes into two pieces, they give you aid, and then they charge you back assessments for things like the MBTA site in Westborough, mosquito control, things of that nature. So when you get the net impact of those two things, right now, state aid is, under the governor's proposal, is going to go up 0.89%, so less than 1%. Our budget model right now assumes a 1% increase. Now, this is a long haul because the House and the Senate haven't really gotten into their budget work yet, but we typically don't know what our state aid is until well after town meeting. I don't anticipate, based on any information we've gotten from the state thus far, I don't anticipate any significant increases in state aid. So unless there's some early resolution of some kind, and even if there were, I don't know that it would help Northborough. At this point, we are going to proceed with the 1% assumption, and as I've said to you every year, if we get a little bit more in state aid, and when I say a little, I mean a little bit more, it's a $5.4 million account. However, the difference between what we assume and what we get is $20,000 or $30,000 to $40,000 at most. And then, although that's real money, once we set our budget through town meeting, the only thing that additional revenue can be used to do is to reduce the tax impact when we set the tax rate in November. So there really isn't a downside to the taxpayers for us being conservative. But again, the delta here is minimal. In terms of new growth, this is the first year that we have pushed our new growth numbers up. Generally, we tend to be conservative. We assume $30 million in new growth. That's new development in town. We know also that it takes many different forms. There's real estate, there's buildings, and there's personal property. So it's not, all of it is new buildings going up or new houses being built. A good portion of that is personal property, which we know depreciates in value. So right now, we are, our budget model assumes 45 million in new growth. And that's more than we've budgeted on the front end in probably 5 or 6 years. But we also know that we have significant buildings under construction, and we feel comfortable pushing those numbers a little bit in this budget cycle. In terms of new growth, we're looking at this year, and I know this is sort of a little bit of a refresher from what we discussed back in December at the financial trend monitoring. We know we'll have strong new growth in fiscal '21, which is the budget we're planning for, and we think we'll have decent new growth in '22 and partially going into '23, based on the development that is either permitted or currently under construction. And just in terms of new growth, you know, we had the mall where Wegmans is, Northborough Crossing, and we had Avalon Bay, 382 units of residential housing, all go in over about a 2 to 3 year period. That was the big push for new growth for us. And sitting here today, we're really in the next big push. We have 1 million square feet. The last industrial zoned area down off of Bartlett is all underdeveloped. Literally, it's all under development. So we're gonna be okay in terms of new growth for the next couple of years. But as I've said to you, looking out after that, new growth is going to drop down. Before this year, we were looking at an annual average of about 35 million rather in new growth. So we're going to see this little bump over the next couple of years as we realize that new development that's going in, and then it's going to drop back off. But this year, we are moving forward, and we're assuming $45 million in new growth for fiscal '21. Local receipts. This is building permits, motor vehicle excise, and hotel primarily. You know, you've heard me talk about these as being elastic revenues in that they move with the economy. So when the economy's doing well, people build, they remodel kitchens, they buy new cars, they go out to eat. When the economy contracts, people stop building, they stop going out to eat or reduce going out to eat, and they live with that car for a couple more years. So those revenues are an area that we tend to be conservative on by design because we're projecting them out 18 months in advance of the fiscal year end close. So we're trying to figure out, in terms of building permits and local receipts, right now, where we're going to wind up at the end of fiscal '21, so, you know, June 30th of 2021. So we're in, what, 11 years of an expansion, and every economist, it's funny, last year, all the economists were worried about a recession. Just read an article in the paper yesterday where they're saying not necessarily recession, but new growth in the economy is going to slow, and that's what all of the indicators are. So I'm not seeing that those revenues are going to grow in the next year, so we want to be conservative with those. Probably the most important recent development that's worth discussing is back in December, again, we looked at projections, and we assumed in order to maintain level service budgets that we would go up about 3.5%. On my side, the general government side of the budget, I need about a 3.5% increase in order to maintain services. Out of the general government side of the budget, we include health insurance for all school employees, liability insurance for all school employees, and pension costs for all non-teaching school employees. So those two things, health insurance and pension costs, typically eat up about 2/3 of that 3.5% that we have to work with. So at the end of the process, you know, we have contractual obligations for wages. There isn't a lot to work with. So, you know, you heard me say earlier, Tim, when Tim asked about the facilities manager, it is a difficult thing for us to add a full-time department head level benefit eligible position. You're talking about $100,000 in salary plus benefits. It's very difficult to fit in under this model. But we are very cognizant of the tax impact, and we want to try to minimize that. Back in December, we told you that based on our assumptions, the revenue assumptions and the expenditure side of approximately 3.5% increases, we were looking at a projected tax impact of about $390 roughly. So that's where we were. And so we've pushed our new growth estimates, and we've pushed the revenue estimates to where we're comfortable, but a little more aggressive than we would normally be because we are cognizant of that tax impact. Since then, the schools have, a K-8 school budget has come in at 3.15 because we have, it's funny, on the opposite ends of the spectrum, you have the high school budget hitting us pretty hard because we have more kids from Northborough going there, less kids from Southborough, so we're responsible for a larger share of that budget. But at the middle school level, the numbers are all down, so they're able to make some constraining cuts there that aren't critical to the services. So it's based on, less kids, you can consolidate classes, eliminate a couple positions. So I thank the superintendent for that. So the K-8 budget right now is at 3.15. The high school budget, where we're having the difficulty in terms of the impact on the budget and the tax impact, the overall high school budget right now is being proposed at 3.3%. And we had some very lengthy discussions with the superintendent and he with the school committee about releasing some of the free cash, the excess and deficiency fund at the high school level. They have a new policy, so they want to maintain reserves for unexpected things like a special education need that moves into town. That can range up to $300,000-$400,000, one child coming in with needs. So they need to have that flexibility. So they have a policy that they want to maintain their reserves at a certain level. They're able to release $300,000, and I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out here, but they're able to release $300,000. And the bottom line is the high school budget's going to go up 3.5%. Our assessment is going to go up 36%. So when we met back in December, we were forecasting or projecting a 7 to 9% impact, which is what we felt last year because of the shifting enrollment. So because there was one more year after their policy, their initial E&D account, they were reserving. Now they feel comfortable releasing it. So the combination of a smaller overall budget increase with $300,000 in the E&D account being released has reduced the overall tax impact. So let me just get to the bottom line, which everybody wants to know, which is, based on these recent budget developments, what are we looking at for a tax impact? Well, we were forecasting about $390 based on where the budgets sit today, and again, that process is still ongoing. We believe the impact will be about $65 less. So that's good news. And I can't say enough about the cooperation and the collaboration that we've had with the superintendent and the school committee on taking the perspective in Northborough, different than you might see in other communities, where it's not an us against them, it's not general government against the schools, and we fight for limited resources. We all get together, we look at what we have for resources, and we look at where the needs are, and we work through that process. And in doing so, we've been able to, at least at this stage of the game, we think reduce a pending tax impact. So that's good. So based on this right now, where we stand in terms of our key budgets, and again, this process is still unfolding, the superintendent has a recommended budget for the high school that will be taken up and hopefully approved by the school committee on February 26th. So that isn't complete yet. The Appropriations Committee has begun weekly meetings with the departments to review budgets. They're meeting this Thursday, and we'll actually be meeting all day, or 9 a.m. to 1 or 2 p.m. on Saturday, March 7th, to go through all the school budgets. And then every week, every Thursday after that, the next one, this Thursday will be DPW. Saturday, the 7th, will be the schools, the K-8, the high school. The following Thursday, police, fire, Assabet Valley, and then they'll meet with library, senior center, and any other smaller departments that make sense. So everything is moving ahead. We're still waiting in, well, let me back up. So in terms of key budgets, the K-8 schools budget's up 3.15. General government is up 3.5, which was the target from back in December. Assabet Valley, just like we have the issue at the high school with the shifting enrollments, we have, we're going from 45 Northborough students to 53 students at Assabet. And so we're looking at about a 25% increase in our Assabet assessment. And again, their overall budget is up 4% roughly, but we're sending more kids, so we own a bigger share of that budget. Just the same as we're sending more kids to Algonquin Regional High School, we're gonna own a bigger piece. And I can't stress enough that those increases in assessment is nothing that the superintendents in either of those schools are doing. They're managing reasonable budgets, in my opinion, to maintain services. But as the student enrollment shifts, so does the budget assessment and allocation, and that's just where we are in this particular budget cycle. So Assabet, overall, between the operating and the debt assessment for them, right now, they're, by the way, these are voted, so these are locked in. It's a 20% increase. It is what it is. At the high school, between, if the superintendent's recommend budget moves forward, between the operating assessment and the capital assessment, our share of the debt for the high school building project from back, a while back, is about 4.23%. So in my opinion, these budgets have been really held to where they need to be to sustain services. But there's certainly, as I know this board wants there to be, a very strong sensitivity to making sure that the services remain, but the tax impact is managed. And at this point, you know, if we're down anywhere from $300, $330 or $40 of a tax impact based on, you know, these assessments that we don't control, we're doing well. If these assessments were down at 3.5, like the general government side of the budget is, you know, the average tax bill would go up about $260. So the difference between $260 and $330 or $340 is going to be shifting enrollments and our responsibility for that share of the budget. There's really nothing that the Board of Selectmen or the Appropriations Committee can do about that. All we can ask is that the superintendents work with us to, knowing that we're getting hit with these shifting enrollments and our assessments are going up, is to be responsible, fiscally responsible in terms of your budgets. And I can't say enough, particularly Greg Martineau, the Algonquin and the K-8 school superintendent, that I always get nervous. He's my fourth superintendent, okay? So I go back to Charles Gobron, and the relationship changed and the cooperation improved, then Christine Johnson, and now Greg. And that trust and collaboration is continuing, I'm pleased to say. I can't be happier with the cooperation and the sharing of information that's going on. So we're in a good place. In terms of the general government side of the budget, today I had conversations with our health insurance consultant, and I'm just about ready to finalize that budget for us. And as I said, we'll spend the next month or so through the Appropriations Committee reviewing the departmental budgets. But by and large, all you're going to see are service-sustaining budgets, but making sure that we're also taking care of, as you all know well, our unfunded liabilities, our debt service, all the things that we talk about at the financial trend monitoring about maintaining our healthy financial condition. And so that's where things stand now. So I think we've made some good progress. There's some details to tie up. Your March 23rd meeting will be the joint hearing between the Board of Selectmen and Appropriations. And between now and then, we'll button up the details and get you some more information. But I thought the board would appreciate receiving an update on how things are shaking out, because it could have gone the other way. And, you know, we could have had more difficulty constraining budgets, and the tax impact could be going higher instead of lower. So again, it's the collaboration, it's all the hard work, and it's the willingness to have honest conversations about what departments have to maintain services. And I think we've done that, not just on the general government side, but again, the primary difference between Northborough and many other communities is the people that are in these key roles have a holistic view of Northborough as an organization, not a school department versus general government, police versus fire, DPW versus whatever. You know, we are all working together. As I look back at my 3 department heads back here, and they're smirking. Because they know that's the case. They all get along. You know what, I can't, I can't stress enough the positive working relationships and the professionalism at the department head level, and then, at the committee levels, like yourselves and appropriations and the school committee, of people having good perspective and working together. So that's my update. We'll, again, on a weekly or a meeting basis, we'll have additional information. We'll refine that further. But I hope you would agree that we are headed in the right direction, and the departments will have the resources they need to provide the services that you've come to appreciate and depend on.
Great. Thank you very much, John. I just want to add my thanks to you and the superintendent and town staff and everything for the work that goes into this each and every year. We seem like we're faced with some wrinkle that arises and causes a problem with the budget. We've had it with health insurance, we've had it with the enrollments last year, and shifting enrollments at the high school, and
Had it
seemed
with
that
cuts in state aid,
in state aid,
economies, recession. There's always some budget surprise that sort of peaks up.
and continue to find, through the strong working relationships and collaboration, solutions to these problems that get us to town meeting in good shape, enviable shape a lot of times. So appreciate all the work that goes into that.
Thank you.
Any comments from the board? Leslie?
Yeah, I happened to be in a meeting last week, and I actually said that to the superintendent, how happy you were about the collaborative dynamic between, you and the town and the superintendent, and he was very happy to hear that and was in total agreement. He obviously feels the same way, but it hasn't always been like that. A few superintendents ago, a town administrator ago.
Yeah.
So, it really is important when it comes down to the real nuts and bolts of the budget. The fact that you have that kind of relationship makes a big difference. So, thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Julia?
So this is my second year going through this, and I am interested in knowing how the master plan is going to be integrated into the capital improvement plan.
Sure. Well, at this point, the master plan still hasn't been adopted by the planning board.
Right.
So they're still going through that process. Like any other plan, it has to be, completed. And then, in the case of the master plan, we've discussed that there will be an implementation committee. So once the plan is done, then an implementation committee gets created to go through all the different sets of goals that are contained in the master plan, and where there are goals and objectives of a capital nature that would require a capital, and again, capital is a physical investment of some kind, typically, a roadway and infrastructure, something of that nature. And it could be a study as well that would lead to a capital asset being acquired. So once the implementation committee goes through that process, they decide what the priorities are going to be, then those priorities would then get communicated to the financial planning committee, who is responsible for putting together the 6-year capital plan. And so then it would get in, and more than likely, at a subsequent town meeting, we would take up those projects just like we do anytime anybody comes forward and requests a senior center or a library project, a new truck, roadway infrastructure, any capital assets of that nature.
So I find this table to be really useful, the one where the departments have the breakdown and it goes out to 2026.
Yeah, that's the capital improvement plan. It's a 6-year plan.
Right, and I noticed that there are some placeholders. Should there be a placeholder for the master plan?
Well, there needs to be a
More
placeholder.
concrete.
You can't just say master plan. Well, what is it? So I think there's more process that needs to take place. Again, the master plan hasn't even been adopted. The implementation committee hasn't been formed. They haven't determined what the priorities are. Once they do, I imagine there will be a communication from the implementation committee to the financial planning committee, in terms of these are the things that we'd like to talk to you about, including in the 6-year capital plan. I think it's important that people know that we maintain a 6-year plan so that we're able to spread things out. We spread out the tax impact. We are able to budget the resources that we have effectively. And then last but not least, we also have an opportunity, and the fire chief is a poster guy for this. We have the opportunity to seek grant funding for some of these projects. And so a number of projects that are originally included in the 6-year capital improvement plan fall off because we find other funding sources. So it's important to have that time to vet out these projects, make sure that the budgets are adequate, make sure that everything has been thought out, that there's been enough process around it, people have had a chance to comment on them, and then also to see if there's other funding sources. And we've been very successful. We've had a lot of large projects like the Lincoln Street Building Project. We got a $10.4 million grant for that. Took us 5 years actively trying to get that. We got personal breathing apparatus gear, $290,000 worth through a fire assistance grant. It took us, 3 applications to get that. And so there's a number of projects in there. We also did things like improvements to the gazebo and Memorial Field and a number of other projects that we were able to partner with Assabet Valley Tech to come in and do those projects for us at a very minimal cost. So again, the idea is to get everything there, and then you have a chance to look at how it all interrelates and to plan, because it's a planning tool. But we can't plan until we get through at least adopting the master plan and then prioritizing what's included in there for goals. So that's how that would work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Number 2, status update on fiscal year 2020 snow and ice budget. Scott Charpentier, DPW Director. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Picked the appropriate day for it. 64 degrees in my truck when I got in it to leave this afternoon, so let's talk snow and ice. You all have the memorandum that I prepared. It's been updated. It has our snowfall totals thus far this year at 28.8 inches. We've had one very long sleet-only event, which was a lot of salt application. Right now, we have a $437,000 budget for snow and ice. We've expended approximately 61% of that budget. The money remains on each one of the items. We have different items for different pieces of the work, for staff overtime, contractual services, for plow trucks that we hire, salt, the purchasing of the salt, and repairs to equipment. So no one single line item is fully expended. They're all kind of following that trend around that 60% level, with the exception of our equipment. When you're pushing a lot of really thin, wet, sloppy concrete they call snow, it beats the trucks up pretty bad. So we've had a few repairs. Looking back to last year, which was also a light snow year, we actually were under budget by the end of that fiscal year's snow and ice season. This time last year, we had 26.5 inches of snow. So we were about 2 inches less last year compared to this year. So last year ended up being a nice year. So fingers crossed, knock on wood, we continue the trend. I don't know if 65 is the trend I'm looking for in February, but.
So as the board knows, we tend to take a 5-6 year rolling average of our expenses because it fluctuates. There are times where we've come to you this time of year and we're $250,000 over expended. Now, if we've had blizzards, an actual blizzard or a major storm event, oftentimes we'll get FEMA reimbursement or MEMA reimbursement, so federal or state, but it's not uncommon for us to get those reimbursements 1 to 2 fiscal years after we get approved.
Yeah, we received, there was a disaster declaration 2018, March 2018. We had the early storm in March where all the trees came down and took out everybody's power, and then a week later we had 1.5 feet of snow drop on top of it. The latter of the storms was a disaster declaration by the federal government, and we just received those funds a few months ago.
So normally what happens is if we get into that situation, even though we might see some reimbursement from the state or federal governments, we have to get through that. And so sometimes this time of year, we would be looking from the Appropriations Committee, an emergency transfer, or at the end of the year, we might be letting you know, hey, we're gonna be back, we're gonna need to make some transfers, so we have to constrain budgets someplace else to make this all balance. As of right now, as I said, we'll knock on wood, we're looking okay. So we just figured we'd give you that update. And oddly enough, and Scott and I had this conversation last year, because sometimes the years, the budgets look like the impacts are crazy, but you really can't remember having any snow. Well, a freezing rain event that drags over 2 days is more costly than if you got, 10 inches of snow that just came down and you plow it and you're done. The freezing rain events are as expensive or more expensive than snow events. And so this year, we've been lucky, we've gotten snow events, but they haven't been long duration by and large, and we've had fewer ice events. One good ice storm will if you're declaring an emergency or a disaster event, one good ice storm wipes pretty much everybody out, but,
48 hours of ice is a budget killer. It's somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000 every time we treat the roads with salt. And in a single day, you can treat it 6 or 7 times.
so for now, we're in good shape. So, and the weather was gorgeous today, so we got that going for us.
Any questions, Leslie?
Yeah, just real quickly, this is not exactly snow and ice, but I figured I'd ask while you're up here. I noticed that one of my favorite potholes was filled, kind of the one near the library near Patty Lane.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I've almost hit that barber shop trying to drive around.
That would be the Mass DOT pothole, for those at home.
Was wondering about who filled that.
That would be Mass DOT
Okay.
filling their pothole on their road.
Okay, so it's state highway, so anything along there, they are taking care of.
Correct.
Okay.
As is West Main Street after you leave Times Square and you head out toward Wood Hill. That's also state highway, even though it's not Route 20.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Julian?
So you mentioned that you salt the roads, but there's this talk about other materials that they use to melt the ice, like brine. Do you have opinions about that, and how do you see that in the future?
We use brine on our trucks as well.
So
Yep.
you use a
Yeah,
combination?
every one of our salt trucks has 2 high-density polyethylene tanks on each side. Those tanks are filled with a calcium brine. So we'll treat the roads and the salt with the brine and the salt. What you see on,
Bringing costs down, or not so much?
it allows the salt to be activated more quickly. If we were to salt in the middle of the night and there's not a lot of traffic, the brine allows the salt to activate. If I put salt down and there's no cars crushing it, it's not activating. It's just kind of sitting there. And it takes a long time for it to activate. If you put a little bit of brine with it, it allows that salt to activate more quickly and melt the road.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Item 3, review of preliminary town meeting warrant summary. John?
Sure. So, in your packet is a very preliminary listing of potential town meeting warrant articles. And again, this is just a summary listing. At your next meeting, this will be flushed out with the full descriptions. And at a subsequent meeting, you'll have the final warrant. So basically, this month, about a couple of weeks ago, all the boards and committees and staff departments is a deadline for them to get potential warrant articles to me. And then we start kind of going through them. So in terms of the draft listing, it's a fairly reasonable warrant so far. When you go articles, and by the way, the numbers can change and the order can also potentially change. This is just an initial sketch outline of what we are going to be looking at for the upcoming year. Articles 1 through 11 are all the budget articles, the same budget articles in the same order that we do every single year at town meeting. Those are followed by 13 capital budget. We were just talking about the capital improvement plan and the capital budget. The Financial Planning Committee has just completed their review and approval of the fiscal '21 capital budget, and there are 13 warrant articles for various equipment and building projects. No really major building projects. We do have the Assabet water tank rehabilitation in there, and the water and sewer operations building. Those will be funded out of water and sewer user fees. But that's the capital budget. You will get a whole separate presentation on the capital budget as you do every year. And then we've got a few in the middle here, a few unique articles this year. Article 26 is the old fire station at 13 Church Street. So this isn't the fire station on Pierce Street. This is the old fire station on Church Street. And as you all know, when I started here, I wanted to surplus that building because it is of no value or use, and it can't be salvaged. It is in very much in disrepair. From the outside, it has a very quaint facade to it. However, we didn't want to surplus that building because we were trying to get the state to do the downtown traffic improvements and to widen Church Street. And so that project happened, and then we replaced the culvert on Church Street. All of this is right in front of that building. And so we didn't want to surplus it and then have to go back and buy a premium, either take it or buy it back from whoever we sold it to be able to widen Church Street. So that's why we held on to it. Then we were going to surplus it again, and we got into the site location search for the fire station building project. And one of the sites that we were looking at was directly across the street, the specialties area and that lot. And if that was the case, that building and that space might have been needed for overflow parking or a non-emergency equipment storage, so we held on to it there. So neither of those uses are now needed, and so at this point in time, my recommendation would be, and I'm the one that put this in here, would be to surplus that building. There is somebody interested in a butter, potentially interested in buying it and redeveloping it. My thoughts on this are we would go to town meeting. Town meeting would authorize, as we always do when it comes to real property considerations, would authorize the Board of Selectmen to surplus the property. But I think we probably would want to have a discussion about putting certain constraints on that redevelopment so that we can get something, because it's in the downtown and there'll be sensitivity to the fact that it's in the downtown, but working with developers so that we can surplus the building, not just based on what they're willing to pay us, but take into consideration what it is that they're looking to build. So we get something that's nice and something that will reflect on the downtown well. And I've been contacted by a couple individuals that are interested in that. And so at this point in time, it'd be my recommendation to the board that you include this in here and that we surplus that property. Holding on to it any longer serves no municipal purpose, and we are going to get into a point where it deteriorates enough that it creates a liability for the town. And so now would be a good time to repurpose and redevelop that site. Article 27 is a cell tower lease. When we acquired the land up at 119 Colburn Street, where our where our senior center is, and the Edmonds Hill property and all of that used to be the old Rod and Gun Club. When we acquired that, there was a cell tower already existing, and there was a long-term lease involved. That lease has expired, and so the town now owns it. And so in order for us to engage in a lease in excess of 3 years under Mass General Law, it requires town meeting approval. Nobody wants to lease a cell tower out for 2 or 3 years. They want 10 or 20 years. So what we'd be seeking is approval from town meeting to authorize us to engage in a process, and it would be a bid process, a public bid process, to basically lease out that cell tower. And under the lease, the leasee is responsible for maintaining the tower and all the equipment and the liability and all of that. So that tower is an asset for the town, and this lease will be a revenue source for us. Right now, the right now, the funds that come in through the lease have to be used to pay off the debt service, because it was a debt excluded project when we acquired that land up there. But that ends, it either ends this year or in the next, it's either ended or is about to end. So far, those revenues have been added into the, have been taken off the debt exclusion approval for that land acquisition. Moving forward, we'll enter a new lease, we'll put it out to bid, very similar to what we did with the cell tower behind the police station. Same process. But again, in order to do that, we need approval from town meeting to engage in a long-term lease. So, Article 28 was a proposal that was brought forward to this body by Selectman Kalen to talk about potentially starting town meeting even earlier and ending it a little bit earlier, so 6 to 10 instead of 7 to 11. And so last discussion was that by consensus, the board was interested in having that discussion. So I've put a placeholder on here, so I'm assuming, again, through your consensus, that that's something you're interested in. If you are, what we will do is one of your upcoming meetings, we'll hold a public hearing on that, a public input session, so people can decide, you can get some input. But again, this is your warrant, and you can put that on or not put it on, it's up to the board. But I think the discussion that took place when this came up was, that's interesting, we're open to it, and we're gonna take a little bit of feedback. So that's why that's included. Article 29, just like the cell tower lease, the school bus transportation contract generally is a 5-year contract. And they're 5 years because the folks that bid on those have to buy school buses, and they amortize them over the 5 years of the contract. Anything less than that generally results in less advantageous bidding. So in order for the schools to go out for a 5-year contract, they'll need town meeting's approval as well. They've done that in the past, so you've seen this before. So those are sort of the unique ones. And then Article 30 through 37, there's 8 of these articles, and those are the Community Preservation Committee's articles for things ranging from capital improvements, like the Assabet Park renovations, to vegetation management in town ponds. Includes also White Cliffs debt service. And so those articles get taken up as sort of a cluster, just like the capital budget articles do, and you'll have a separate presentation at your meeting by Kathy Jubin and John Campbell. As you do every year, they'll come in and go through all those articles. And you've probably seen some communications on that already, but they'll come in and do that. And then, last but not least, we've got 8 zoning amendments that are being proposed by the planning board. I don't really have much information on these. Some of them are very preliminary. None of them have been reviewed by town council. These are essentially placeholders that have been brought forward by one or more member of the planning board, and so they're in there. In total, we're looking at about 45 or 46 articles at this point. So again, a reasonably manageable warrant. Between now and your next meeting, we'll give you the full write-ups and flush it out. At your March 9th meeting, you will vote to close the warrant. At that point, it goes back to town council for final review, and all the final Ts get crossed and the Is get dotted. And between now and then, any required public hearings or public input sessions would take place at your upcoming meetings.
Okay.
So that's where we are in terms of the warrant at this stage of the process. And like I said, at your next meeting, we'll have a lot more information for you. But these look like, at least that we from our sources, departments, our boards and committees, my office, the Board of Selectmen, these are the articles that we're looking at potentially for town meeting.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Any questions? No questions. Very good.
Very good.
Discussion of town meeting reminder on tax bill envelope. Julianne, you had asked that this be placed on the agenda for discussion.
I did.
Yeah. We have a summary page here, outlining this. It was estimated the cost would be approximately $500. There's a list of the current methods being used to bring to the attention of the public the date and time of town meeting, which is the last week of April. I'm sorry, fourth Monday in April.
April 27th.
Yes. So, Julianne, would you care to advocate?
I would. So, the reason I brought it up is I do think that people appreciate as many reminders as possible. We're all busy, and to have the information about town meeting, which is very important, in as many different methods as possible would be beneficial. In addition to the fact that, I remember last year, the signs went up, but they weren't up for a really long time. We don't have a banner like a lot of towns have. And I understand that, on our last bullet here, it was in the annual town census information, but actually, and Jason, I have to credit you with pointing out that we do have a time change this year, which can be critical. We need 100 people for a quorum. So I think for $500, it's a worthwhile expense to encourage people to come, to kind of say, we want you all to come, and especially with this time change, it could be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or opinions? Dawn?
We talked about the fact that the budget's tight already, and I think spending $500 to encourage people to come to town meeting is not the place I want to spend $500. We've already done a mailing. It's already gone to households by doing it through the census. I have found, and people go to town meeting because they want to go to town meeting. It's not, or they don't go to town meeting because they don't want to go to town meeting. They don't want to spend the time. I don't think that you could send a note to their house every week, and I don't think it's going to make a difference, because there's those people that are going to go that are interested, and then there's those people that really just don't care. I know $500 doesn't sound like a lot of money, but I can think of other places I would rather spend the money. I think we've got so many places listed here that knowing about town meeting is not an issue. I think it's just being motivated to go.
Okay, thank you. Any other opinions? Tim?
I'd just like to say that I agree with Dawn. I mean, it's not in the budget. The budget is tight, and I think if we were going to spend an extra $500 on anything, I can think of, off the top of my head, many other areas where people would appreciate another $500. And with all the information that does go out to the public in various methods, that I think there's enough public postings about town meeting without having to spend another $500.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, I think, in general, aside from all the work that John and his team do for the town budget and so forth, taxes do increase. And I think to spend $500 in what I would call an unnecessary expense is not something that I want to do. So I can't support this.
Okay, thank you. I have I guess a couple avenues to this. One is that I guess I might be more inclined to support it if I had some sense of how many additional people this notification would bring in. I don't see that there's an easy way to determine that. I also looked for information about town meeting attendance. Among other things, I found studies recently undertaken in 2017 by the town of Southborough and the town of Boxborough. And in those cases, it seemed the clear message wasn't that people didn't know when town meeting was taking place. It was that they either weren't interested in town meeting, or they found the process of town meeting too burdensome to bother with. So, as it's been pointed out frequently, the thing that gets people to town meeting is some kind of hot button issue that has a lot of controversy attached to it, or very widely differing opinions.
Not that we're encouraging that to
Not-
take place
not
after
that
I
we're
just went
encouraging
through a
it.
good warrant.
Right, right. I'm not of the mind, I guess, that an additional mailing to households is gonna have any material effect, or at least lacking some kind of information to indicate how effective it might be. I'm not in favor of even a $500 expenditure. I'm not in favor of doing that at this time. I think it's clear that it's more the content of town meeting, which some people are engaged with and others are not. And the process of town meeting, some people find it difficult to sit through several hours of people going to the microphone and speaking on different matters, the presentations of information. It requires some amount of attention, it requires some amount of patience, it requires some amount of determination to attend, to go through the process and to participate. And I think some number of people just don't find it to be something they wish to engage in. So I think from that standpoint, if you'd like to have a vote, we could have a vote.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
And I respect your opinions,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Julian. Yeah. Execution of Cemetery Deed 1093.
Mr. Chair, I move the board vote to execute cemetery deed 1093.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Thank you. Any other business to come before the board?
No other business this evening.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Great, thank you all very much.